When it comes to IT, it can be difficult to know where to start. With a field as big as this and so many paths to choose from, it can be quite overwhelming with the information overload. I found myself in that place where I knew that tech related jobs and careers really appealed to me, but I didn't know where to start. I faced intimidation of learning. And let's face it, going into a new career can always seem intimidating. Changing a job role, especially when you get up to a certain age, it makes you wonder, am I up for this? I remember starting at 28 years old, and I thought, well, I need to look at getting into something serious that I need to make a career out of. And that was a real challenge to me. And, I want to say that after being in the industry for about close to 7 years, I've ran across all types of people that face similar struggles. One of the biggest challenges that I felt that I faced was when it come to tech related roles, I knew that troubleshooting was a big part of that. Now that was a big intimidation to me because I felt that to be good at troubleshooting, you had to be a very creative person. And growing up, I always felt like, man, I feel like I really lack creativity. That was an area that I always felt like I was challenged with. It wasn't until, my wife and I was sitting at a dinner table with a couple of friends. And they, when I was explaining this to him and telling them, some of my fears and some of my concerns, I said, hey, look, I just don't feel like I'm that much of a creative person to take on the roles and responsibilities that come with a job that I'm passionate about. I just don't feel like I'm very creative. And it wasn't until I was talking to them, they just simply said something to me that just changed my total perspective on things. And they said, all that creativity is just learn how to ask better questions. And that was something that stuck with me. So today, I want to take time to go over you with 5 different things that I wish I'd have known earlier when beginning in IT. Now, the first thing that I would like to cover with you about is learning how to seek out resources. Regardless of your location, regardless of your education background, there are places that you can look. I would challenge you to talk to a career counselor. Another thing that you can do, and I highly recommend this, talk to somebody in the business. Go to, if you don't say you don't know someone personally per se, go to one of the local businesses near your area and talk with them. Ask if you can shadow them. Ask them questions. Say you want to learn more about cybersecurity. I would highly encourage you take a certification course. Go to one of these sites like Coursera or go to the CompTIA website. Learn more about the certifications. Call your local businesses. Speak with local IT staff at businesses. Call up HR at a local factory or something, or a warehouse, and ask if you can pick the brain of somebody that does work in tech. Ask if you can have a moment of their time. If you know somebody that is tech savvy, offer to take them to lunch and say, hey, look, I want to take some time for us to sit down and talk. That way I can learn more about what I'm trying to get into. I've got a passion. I want to get into a tech role. I want to get into, maybe say you want to get into help desk. You want to start from scratch and say, hey, I'm interested in this, but I don't know the steps and how to get there. I would always highly recommend seek out people and if you don't know, ask questions. The second thing I wanted to talk to you about is when you have something in mind, create goals. Set a goal to say, within 6 months, I'm going to acquire an internship. Or within 5 months, I'm going to get my A+ certification. The first thing that I like to do when I'm going after something like that is I like to download the learning objectives. And I like to collect my learning resources, whether that's a book, whether that's a video series, whether that is lab courses. Make a bill of materials, if you will, then break that goal down into tasks. Say, this week, I'm going to study on this section of my certification, and then schedule out your weeks. Which leads me into my third thing that I want to talk about. Dedicate time toward those goals. Set a dedicated time and schedule time where you're going to work on your goals. It may be studying for a certification. It may be job hunting. It may be looking for an internship. Whatever it is, set time, whether if it's 30 minutes every other day or 5 hours out of the week. Take that time to commit to work toward your goals. You know, you and I, a lot of times, if we're working full-time jobs, we'll commit 40 hours a week to that job. But you need to take time to commit time toward your goals and to what you're trying to set and the vision that you have for your life and how you're going to move forward. The fourth thing, somewhat related to the first thing that I mentioned, learn to ask questions. When you are diving into what you're learning or when you're working towards your goal, always take time to reassess what you're doing. You know, if you're going into networking and let's say you run across new subjects and things that you're unfamiliar with, take that time to reach out and to ask questions. If you're learning under somebody, if you're in a class, you know, don't be afraid to speak up and say, hey, look, I don't have it. Could you explain this a little bit more in depth? Never assume that you got it. If you don't know, just simply tell somebody like, hey, look, I don't know what you're talking about. And take the time to learn from that person. But I think one of the worst things that we can do is we can have something that we're afraid to ask, and then that opportunity goes by. And then it ends up costing us in the future. So, you know, one of the big things I want to tell you is no matter how far along you are, whether if you're in IT like 7 years like I am, maybe you've been in it for like 30 years, or you've been in it or you're just getting started. Never be afraid to ask questions. I don't care what it is. When it comes to pursuing a goal or being determined that you're going to learn or move into something, never be afraid to ask. The fifth and final thing that I wanted to talk to you about is to be sure to set out to gain experience. I know the tendency with people sometimes is to make sure that they have all their ducks in a row and to make sure that everything's perfect before they go out to get experience. And I would say that that's kind of a trap. Don't be afraid to go out there to get experience out of the fear of making mistakes. As a matter of fact, I'll just go ahead and tell you that, you know, we're all going to make mistakes as we're going along the path, or along the learning path. But don't let fear of mistakes or fear of, well, I don't know enough to go out and to try to work that, or to try to get experience on that yet. Always be willing, you know, be willing to launch out, be willing to reach out. And if that fear is a legitimate concern of yours, just be upfront and say, hey, look, I don't know, but I'm willing to learn if you can help me. You know, a lot of times we miss, I feel, and I know that I in fact did within the first couple of years. I let the fear of not knowing enough keep me from gaining experience to get me ahead. I think in our mind, we all want to put our right foot forward and that we all want to do our best. And a lot of times, this will keep us from wanting to gain experience. This will keep us from wanting to ask questions. This will keep us from wanting to share our ideas with other people, for that fear of failure or that fear of getting in over our heads. And, you know, I want to speak on that, and I want to say that a lot of times in the past, yeah, that's what held me back. But I found that overcoming that fear really is the key to moving forward in what you're chasing after. And this even goes beyond and outside of IT. You know, really, anything when it comes to goal setting, or it comes to trying to step into something new, or trying to just, you know, take on a task in general. I think a lot of times that fear of reaching out and that fear of stepping out into the unknown, a lot of times can be intimidating to us. So I want to say this in, you know, in like a review. Again, seek out resources, create goals, make sure that you have a dedicated time. Be sure to, again, always ask questions and always look for an opportunity to gain experience. Well, I hope that this video has been helpful for you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Be sure to like and subscribe and to hit the bell for notifications, and I'll see you on the next episode.